And let's see, most of the squares, you can do more, you can bend the squares and, you know, make circles and things like that. But the one that I think is my favorite one, let's see, I think it's that one right here. Is what can you see? With the floating this way, you make one on the side right here.
Mm-hmm, the floating pieces on the side? Okay.
Now they can start questions. I can't think of that.
You could, I think, Chapman, if you want to ask a question, yeah.
So I recall when I asked you about this one that you cite as your favorite, I asked you, well, what really instigated that? Because it looks like those things they use in badminton and a little bit like acorns. And he said, well, I was watching birds. I want all of you to look at his work and think about the movement. He takes these sort of objects, he approaches it very abstractly, but he uses the object to energize the space around them. And this is the sort of thing that causes really professionals to respect his work so highly. I'd like to take the occasion here to welcome those of you from Booker T. Washington. I started studying when I was 8 years old at the museum in San Antonio. And I went through all of the rigors you can amount. I always had to have special things happen. In 1959, I began to teach the high school scholarship class at the Dallas Museum. Willie was in that class. Noel Mahaffey, who's made quite an international reputation, was also in that class. And then we allowed all of the students to come up to the classes at the atelier up at my place on Maple Avenue. Then we had a large house. My framer lived there, so each of them had their own little space, and they were there more than they were at home in school together. And we had some full-time students, several like James Havard and Tom Palmore, who've had books written about them recently. But we had major artists coming in here teaching. We had Elaine de Kooning, we had Hobson Pittman, we had Ben Kamahira. We had all these artists who had exhibits come in. And they'd all look at Willie's work and tell him, look, you were lucky. You found what you should do very early in life. Keep on trucking. Don't let anyone dissuade you. So then in 1968, when Eric Johnson was the mayor, I was appointed to the Goals for Dallas Educational Task Force Committee. And they were unfortunately closing the school at the Dallas Museum. And so I set out to try to get professional training at the high school level in the Goals for Dallas. And it was a struggle, but we got it in there. So that was laying the groundwork for Booker T. Washington School. My granddaughter, by the way, graduated from Booker T. Went on to graduate summa cum laude from TCU, second in her class, then went to New York to study writing. So I'm delighted that you folks can be here. There's an awful lot to be learned from Willie's work, because even when he was in that high school class, somehow or other the oil paint didn't work for him. He was a draftsman, and he recognized it early on. And even though he would start and look at objects, it was what he would do with them that made magic. And that's what the arts are really all about. As one major artist I knew used to say, they're sort of shaman. They're sort of the magic makers of our civilization. This is what the arts are about. And I think that there are many roads to Rome. Nancy Miller, unfortunately, has the flu and wasn't able to be here today. But I know what she would tell you, to always remember that no one can make an artist of you. No one can teach you to be an artist. That's what comes out of you. People can be guides. People can give you their reaction to your work. They can be coaches, but they can't carry the ball during the game, so there's no use in their carrying it during practice. Each of you have to find your own way, and it's the uniqueness of the way you feel about it and what you do with that that is really the important thing. In the meantime, learning to draw, going to, even though some may consider it old-fashioned life drawing classes, all of these things, meeting artists who've found their own way and getting them to look at your work. Perhaps some of you may not want to go to a university or a professional school. Find someone who you really respect and go in, propose that you be their apprentice, like they used to do. Prepare their canvases, grind their paint, sweep the floor, in order to have them sort of coach you into finding your thing to do. It's your thing. It's your life. It's what you bring to it that can make something a work of art. It isn't the object itself. It isn't how much it reflects nature or completely non-objective or non-natural things. It's what the artist's soul that is put into the work that makes something of importance to future people.
Trying to figure out which way, where to put them, and they actually communicate something, I think. If you stand and look at some of these, especially some of these over here, to me it's almost like they're kind of reaching out and trying to say something or trying to get you to communicate with them on some level. And there's one point where maybe I had been up too long, and I thought maybe I could just sort of jump into the drawing and just start playing with these acorn-like shapes. But I think I want to hear from Ann Cushing, perhaps.